coming up.
I think we found out a couple months later that he had his dad's ashes in there and that they were still down there. So we don't know if it was potentially that. It was this particular area is also on an old burial ground. So there's
just perfect storm.
Yeah, 100%.
Welcome to Unholy Vibes, a journey through the realms of true horror. Although not a religious podcast, our guests may present stories intertwined with personal faiths and beliefs to maintain authenticity. We welcome guests from various spiritual backgrounds, acknowledging the impact of their beliefs on their experiences. Thank you for joining. Let's dive in with an open mind and respect for all perspectives.
Welcome to the Unholy Vibes podcast. I am your host, Alex, and today we have another special guest, my buddy Spencer. Spencer, go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name's Spencer. I've been buddies with Alex for a hot minute now, and I'm excited to be here. So excited to tell my stories.
As you all know, I love a good spooky story. I like to pry, whether it's a friend, family, or a stranger. I want to know your spooky stories. And Spencer's got a couple he's going to share with us today. So let's dive right into it.
I have two different ones that are notable. The first one's a little bit more tame, so we'll start with that one. I was probably 18. We were in Utah at the time. So we're living in Utah. We're hanging out at my buddy's house. We had this one buddy whose house we always hung out at. And they had an unfinished basement. And, you know, everybody knows unfinished basement. But
well, in Utah, I had never, that was never, I grew up in
That's
Oregon.
True.
I grew up in Oregon. So when I moved to Utah, I was like, why are all the houses unfinished?
Yeah.
It made zero. It makes sense to me now. It's like a money thing. You know, you can get into a house cheaper and finish it yourself over time, whatever. But it's foreign to a lot of people.
Yeah. Which makes sense. But yeah, so living in Utah, unfinished basement. And me and a group of friends had kind of turned this basement into a hangout of sorts. So we had a giant old sectional, really old. Everything in there was old, either storage or old. And it was just, even before we had kind of cleaned it out and turned it into a hideout of sorts, it was like eerie and creepy.
The glory days, it sounds like.
Yeah. But so we had transformed it into a hideout of sorts, just hung out, took all our buddies down there. We had like I was saying, a giant old sectional. There was an old CRT TV, giant, like a 42-inch CRT TV. It weighed like 1,000 pounds. And so we had turned it into a hangout like that. So one night towards the end of what would have been end of the school year in 2013, my graduation year, and my buddy went to prom, who lived in this house. And so nobody was home at the time. And me and my other buddies, while we were waiting for him to get back, we decided, we're like, hey, let's take this old laptop that my buddy had. Let's take this old laptop, download Slender Man, of all things. I know, Slender Man.
A classic.
Yeah. And go take it into the basement, turn all the lights off, and play Slender Man. So that's what we decided to do. My buddy got a copy of Slender Man. This was back in the day when it was a little bit harder, especially if you were not in the computer scene, because it was a computer game. Being able to acquire it was a little bit harder for us. So we got a copy of that, took it into the basement, turned all the lights off. Nobody was home at the time, and we decided to play Slender Man. So, for anybody that has played Slender Man, obviously it's a horror game. It's a little spooky. But the whole time that we're playing Slender Man, you can just feel that something is off the whole time. Unholy Vibes. Yeah. And a little bit more than when you watch a scary movie or play a scary game and you just get that, gross feeling of just, oh, it's creepy, it's whatever. A little more than just your standard, oh, I'm spooked type feeling. It just felt a little heavy, right? So we were playing that. We're all freaked out at the time. So real quick to preface, this old CRT TV that we had down in the basement was plugged into a really old crappy outlet, and we had to make sure every time we left that it got turned off. So we had to make sure that we turned it off, and we'd have to unplug it from the outlet. And so we'd have to make sure we did that every time when we left. Otherwise, it could cause all sorts of issues. It could start a fire, something else. So that was something that we would always try to make sure that we would do. So we're playing Slender Man in the basement, super freaked out. There comes a point, we hear somebody upstairs come home, and we're all super freaked out. Meanwhile, the whole time that we're downstairs, it just feels like an overwhelming sense of somebody is just there watching you. And you can't shake that feeling. And we all three, there's three of us there, we all feel it. And we're talking about it a little bit, and it's like, something's just not right. So my buddy who was at prom, his mom came home, found out that we were down in the basement, started screaming at us. So we were like, okay, I guess it's time to pack up.
And to be fair, from her point of view, it's like, why are these kids here without my kid? You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Well, we were there all the time. But either way, it's still, I'm sure it's annoying as, being a parent and just having random kids in your house, I'm sure is annoying regardless. So we packed everything up, took the laptop, and we made sure we turned the TV off. We got up and we left. We were hanging out in the neighborhood. We all lived within the same neighborhood, within a block of each other. We were all hanging out, waiting for my buddy to get home. And there comes a point when he's almost done. He shoots us a text. He's like, hey, I'll be home in like 20 minutes. Meet me in the basement. Make sure you guys are there so we can, we can
Prom's
chill.
over, time to game.
Time to hang out with the boys. So we're like, cool. So we go down there. He has so there's a back door, and you come in the back door, and you come around to the left, and right there's the door to the basement that goes down. You can see it right there. And the house is off. His mom had left again, so no one's there. So we go in the back door, and you can kind of see, if you've seen an old CRT TV before, when there's no signal coming from a device, it's just a blank blue screen, right? So you can kind of see just from the crack, it's like there's a blue light coming from the basement. We're like, man, what the heck? That is super freaky. So we're like, whatever. So we start going downstairs. You open the door, and you can clearly see that the TV's on. And so we're all talking. We're like, man, we must have left the TV on and forgot to unplug it, all that stuff, right? So we walk downstairs, flip on all the lights. I go to turn the TV off, and the TV's not on, and it's completely unplugged from the wall. No power to the TV, no nothing, and it's just a static blue screen. We got super freaked out and left. Ran upstairs, left, and I don't think we went back down there for a couple days. It was pretty spooky. So it's just one of those things where you've had happen, and you're like, it's not super freaky, but it's freaky enough and unexplainable enough that you're like, man, what the heck was that?
It's scary because it's unexplainable, right?
Exactly.
The TV's unplugged, the power's off. Where is this coming from, right?
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
Have you talked to your friend about this since? Like,
I've talked to the two buddies that were there. We all just joke about it now. And my buddy still has the USB stick that Slenderman game was on. He has it like locked up in some envelope in his drawer because it's the haunted Slenderman USB stick at this point because of that. So,
do you think games can be haunted?
So I don't think that games themselves are haunted. What I really think happens is you're in an environment that is allowing something of the sort like that to happen, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah. I've talked to a handful of people now, and I think you're bringing in different energies.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And whether or not that's real or if it's just a group mentality of being scared together and you're all kind of feeling the same vibe and it amplifies one another, could be that. But does that make the TV light up when it's not plugged in? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the science behind vibes.
I don't either. So
unfortunately.
And I guess it's completely possible that if you're doing something and you're inviting and creating a lot of that energy or vibes, so to speak, then I guess it's completely possible that it attaches itself to something.
You think a CRT TV could be haunted?
Potentially.
Yeah. Because
I'm not going to rule it out.
Yeah. Who knows, right? We don't
after
know.
what I experienced, but
right. Who knows? And it's funny. I mean, I asked if a game could be haunted just kind of out of a joke. There was a movie years ago, if you remember, it was called like Game Over. It had Frankie Muniz in it, where it was literally like a cursed video game. Like if you played it and you died in the game, then you would die in real life, however you died in the game. It was not a good movie, but like the premise was unique, you know? And I think about that and I'm like, there's been plenty of media out there that has done things like that. But that one was really geared horror wise, you know? It's not like Sword Art Online where it's like, oh, shucks, we're stuck in here. It's this game is popular and it's gone viral and it's cursed somehow or whatever. I don't even remember how the game in the movie got cursed or whatever.
Sounds like Jumanji. I've never seen the movie, so I can't really comment.
You'll have to watch it sometime. It's like from 2009.
Pretty old. Seems old now, but
that was a long time ago. 15 years ago.
Yeah. But it is a very interesting topic regardless.
Yeah.
So,
And so, other than that experience with the TV in that specific house, did anything else happen in that house, or was it just the one-time TV?
nothing that I can think of in that house specifically, other than just, and it's hard to know if it's your own brain or your own psyche that's freaking yourself out. Just going into a dark, dank old basement is always creepy.
Yeah,
no matter who you are.
I experienced an unfinished basement for years living
Yeah.
in. Once I moved to Utah, it was scary. Yeah, you're underground.
Yeah.
You're underground, and there's not really any. It's concrete and random scraps of carpet, and
Yeah, for sure.
no real walls, just supports. So
So I don't know that it's the place itself. Who knows? I guess it's completely possible that, like spiders, for example, they tend to go towards places that are a little bit less inhabited. So it could just be something that, hey, there's not a lot of people that come down here all the time. There's not a lot of interaction. And so spirits, so to speak, just settle down there potentially.
maybe.
Or, it's just your own brain because it's a dark, scary place.
Well, let's take that further. Let's take that thought further, because I like that idea. It's an environment in which those things can grow, right? It's like mold.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
mushrooms, dark, damp, dank, whatever. That's interesting. Because, yeah, I mean, I'm saying the same thing that you did, just differently.
Not to mention that, you take your own, how I was saying that it's a dark, dank basement. It's freaky. If that's the energy that's always going down into that basement, who knows what that could potentially do to something over time.
Yeah, and once you walk upstairs and you're back in the light, you leave
you're
all the
fine.
bad vibes behind, and they stay there, and they
For
just
sure. Shut the
accumulate
door,
maybe.
And you're good.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting? It sparks another thought that there's something about being underground that's unsettling, I think.
Yes, agreed.
Basements in general, you're underground. That's where dead people go,
Yeah. For sure.
And I think it's unnatural, maybe, I don't know, to be like,
Potentially.
I live underground. Like, something's weird about that.
That's why I say, if you look at this type of stuff and try to analyze it a little bit, now it's hard to say because we don't necessarily have just concrete proof of, oh yeah, here's why basements are freaky, because there's just spirits there because of X, Y, and Z. We don't know. We just have our own personal anecdotes of why things are happening a lot of the time.
And I think naturally, though, humans are afraid of the dark,
The unknown.
afraid of the unknown.
The fear of the unknown.
Yeah. You can't reason with it. You can't understand it. It's unknown.
You can't see it.
The
dark to me, is the epitome of the unknown.
Yeah.
You can't see, it's not well lit, and because of that, it's just what's out there. You go into a dark forest, it's a similar type of thing as a basement, and I think that's a lot of what brings a spooky vibe or whatever into a basement or a forest or whatever. It's just dark and unknown and creepy.
I agree. Fascinating stuff. Anyway, please continue. We'll keep going.
All right.
We'll discuss around.
So, back onto the topic of the stories. So, the second one's a little more freaky. It's a little more heavy, and even still to this day, when I talk about it, it freaks me out and gives me chills. So, this would have been, I don't know the exact year. I believe it was the end of 2013. So, I got married in 2014, and I was dating who is now my ex-wife, but at the time in 2013, I believe we were dating. So, she lived in a townhome with her mom that had also another unfinished basement, funny enough. So
there's more unfinished than finished basements in this state.
yeah. So we had been dating probably 2 or 3 months at this point. I had gone over to her house a couple times. And every time that I went there, so you walked in, if you've ever been into a townhome, you kind of know they have a pretty similar layout, I feel like, for every townhome. So you walked in, you had the entryway, you had a stairway up to the right that went upstairs, and then you went in past the stairway, and just to kind of paint a picture, right? Big family room here. And then off to the back right of that, there is the kitchen, and then on this side of the kitchen, there's a garage, and then right here was a door and a stairwell down into this unfinished basement. So that's kind of what the layout of the downstairs was. And so it's right at the top of the kitchen, like at the edge of the kitchen. And when you're in the house, you can just feel more than just, hey, it's a creepy basement. Like you could just feel that there's just something not quite right about this basement. You didn't really want to go down there. It was just really, even if you thought about it, it was just really creepy. You just got really bad feelings. Like that's the best way that I can explain it, is you would just get a really bad feeling or a really bad vibe anytime you wanted to go down it, thought about it, or had to go down there. It was just super freaky. So me and who was my girlfriend at the time, we were hanging out there, and they also had a chihuahua, just a little chihuahua, little Ansi. He hated the basement, would not go down the basement. If you went into the basement, he would sit and just bark at the top of the stairs. Would not go into the basement, would just bark the whole time. And I swear, if you stayed in that basement, that dog would stay there and bark until his vocal cords gave out. He would, like, that serious and that frantic. I mean, you've seen a dog that's like really frantic, trying to tell you something, how they are. It was exactly like that. Super, super creepy. And it was just not good at all. So, because we had gone down there a couple times, and anytime you went down there, that's what would happen. Every time, dog would just sit at the top, would not come downstairs. If you tried to like take him downstairs, like pick him up, because he's a chihuahua, you tried to pick him up and take him downstairs, he would just claw at you. He would hate it. And then even when you were down there, because I think I had gone down there 2 or 3 times, people didn't like to go down there at all. But when you were down there, you could just feel a sense of just dread and heaviness. Almost like if you've ever been in like a forest after it rains and like the air is really thick and just everything feels heavy, right? And that's what it was like. So when you were down there, it was just super heavy, super dark feeling, like just energy wise, not just like the density of the air, but just energy wise, it just felt thick and heavy. And so we hated going down there. So anyways, one night, me and my girlfriend, we were sitting in the living room. We had pushed the couches together, and we're watching a movie on the TV.
In the basement?
Not in the basement, upstairs. So upstairs,
okay.
In the family room. So in the family room, we'd push the couches together. We're watching a movie. And as we're watching a movie, you can kind of hear, sounds like somebody is walking downstairs in the basement. And if you don't know, in an unfinished basement, for the most part, they have concrete floors. Because you're down there, it's concrete, there's no carpet, so it's just concrete floors. So if you can imagine what that sounds like, it sounds like somebody's walking downstairs on just concrete. And you're watching a movie, so you're not fully listening to your surroundings, and you're more paying attention to the movie than what's going on around you. Not to mention the fact that it's a townhome, right? So it could be a neighbor walking upstairs, being loud and running up the stairs. You get accustomed to kind of hearing stuff, right? But it's just happening repeatedly. You can hear it and you're like, man, is somebody in the basement? And we had paused the movie a couple times to listen to it because we both heard it. And both times we're like, hey, is somebody down there? Is somebody trying to break in? Like, what is going on? And you'd pause it and then nothing. You wouldn't hear anything. And we did that a couple times. And where we would listen and nothing, and then you would hear it. And then eventually they got a little more loud, and to where you could very clearly tell that, like, hey, somebody's in the basement. So at this point, we're pretty freaked out, right? We're trying to ignore it because we don't know exactly what it is. And to be fair, I was 18 at the time. I wasn't like, oh, let's go into the basement and let's go see what's down there. And I'm no ghost hunter.
Let's go find out. You know?
Let's go see what's down there.
I'm no ghost hunter. I need that.
Not the bravest boy.
I mean, who would be like, you know what? Today's the day I become. Yeah, no.
So that's what had happened multiple times. And you can imagine being in that position, you'd be a little freaked out. So we were freaked out. We were on edge. At this point, no longer paying attention to the movie as much, trying to pay attention to what is going on downstairs.
And you're sure this wasn't background music or part of the soundtrack of the movie you're watching?
Yeah, 100% coming from the basement.
Okay, because you could hear it still after pausing. Like you'd hear a little bit when you're, okay.
More towards, as it kept going on, you'd find that more and more. You'd pause it and you'd hear it. Imagine hearing footsteps like if you're upstairs and you're hearing somebody walking around on boots downstairs on like a tile floor, that's kind of what it sounded like. And another thing to kind of preface, so unfinished basement, for those of you that don't know, concrete floors. Normally the stairs are also not carpeted or anything. They're just wooden stairs.
Wood.
Bare, rickety wood.
Yeah. Loud.
And loud, yes.
And if you don't know, when stairs are like finished, it's not just carpet. A lot of times they put padding.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a raw carpet on wood. There's padding and everything. So you'd be surprised how much louder unfinished stairs are than
for sure
finished.
I mean, it's like being in it. If you first moved into an apartment or a house, it's like you go into an empty room and it's way louder than it would be after you have your bed and all your furniture.
Mm-hmm.
Very similar type of thing. So anyways, as we're sitting here watching this movie, we pause it. We're going back and forth talking about it. Eventually we're just like, let's go back to what we're doing. So we turn on the movie, we're hanging out, we're doing whatever. And then at this point, we start hearing, now bear in mind, unfinished stairs, what sounds like heavy combat boots just stomping, sprinting up the stairs. Just boom, 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 as fast as you could up the stairs. There's a door at the top of the stairs, pounding on the door. Just, yeah, no joke, pounding on the door, sprinting up the stairs, pounding on the door, jiggling the handle. Just, I mean, I wish I had something to jiggle, but just like, imagine a locked door, and you're fighting for your life, trying to get that door open. That's what it was like. And just pounding. And so we went and bolted it upstairs into her bedroom and locked the door. And I think we called, I can't remember who we called, but we called somebody and then we left like 30 minutes later. And it was a very real and terrifying experience. Yeah. It was very creepy. And we had, I think a couple months later, they had the bishop in their local LDS ward had come and consecrated the place. And then from there, they didn't have any more experiences.
Bless the house and hope for the best.
Yep. And then that was it. I think we found out a couple months later that my girlfriend at the time, her ex-boyfriend had lived in the basement like a year ago. And we had found out after the fact that he had his dad's ashes in there and that they were still down there. So we don't know if it was potentially that. It was this particular area is also on an old, like for the pioneers in Utah, an old burial ground. So there's
just perfect storm.
Yeah, 100%. So there's so many different things that could go into it. So, and there's a couple other creepy things that have happened as well. Didn't happen to me personally, but me and my ex-wife, girlfriend at the time, we had discussed this a couple times, and she remembers, and so do her sisters remember a bunch of just creepy things happening, hearing people talking or people walking when there was no one there, or everybody being downstairs and you could hear people walking upstairs or downstairs. My guess is it was actually probably something downstairs, but just sounded like it was coming from upstairs. Just really creepy stuff. So, dang. And for me personally, it was a very eye-opening and spiritual experience in a way. Because to me at that point, I had never really had an experience like that. And I didn't really believe in ghosts or anything like that, right? Like I believed in spirits and things like that, but I'd never had a direct experience with something like that. And so it was very eye-opening to me. And spiritual experience in a bad way, like in the moment, but also in a good way of just potentially strengthening your beliefs in what you believe in, if that makes sense.
Confirming that there's something somewhat known in the unknown.
Yes.
If that tracks. Oh, man. And you know what? I talk about myself in that aspect where I feel very spiritually closed off. I don't have a lot of these experiences, which is a blessing and a curse. Yeah. In my eyes, I'm kind of happy because at the same time, maybe I don't want something like that because that's terrifying. If I heard someone banging on the door or running around, I've had a few. I mean, I've told you what I've had, and they were scary. Yeah. But in the moment, I was like, "What in the world is going on?" And I don't register it really till later. But that is very in your face.
Very much, yes.
You can't blame that on the wind.
You can't blame it on the wind, and it was very much so, like you said, in your face of something that was just you couldn't ignore it. It was just right there,
and it wasn't just you.
No,
that was there. Yeah,
and she could retell the story the exact same way. So
yeah,
super super.
Was
creepy.
the Chihuahua around when this happened?
I'm sure he was,
because I feel like that would have caused some commotion with the dog where he wanted.
I'm sure he was, but I honestly can't remember. I can't remember if the Chihuahua was there or barking or not, or maybe he had gone with. The fact that I can't remember anything about it would lead me to believe that he wasn't there.
Yeah, I feel like you'd remember
because I can remember that night pretty vividly, unless it was just so unnotable that I just blanked it out.
It's been a while,
but it was 10 years ago at this point now, almost. So it's a long time. So
that is wild, and
I don't think I've had any other experience like that since. So thankfully. Because it's not fun, and
you're not chasing that high.
it's very different from, because we've all watched scary movies. You get spooked out, you get freaked out. It's very, very different to what that type of fear is.
That's entertainment. That's you're searching, you're seeking that out. You are seeking that out as opposed to something's happening and I did not ask for it.
Yes. It is very, when you take that fear and then couple it with adrenaline and everything else, it makes for a very interesting experience.
Yeah, it's like
not in a good way.
Watching a slasher film versus having a killer show up at your house. There's
for sure
one's enjoyable, one not so much. You could look at that as a good thing that you haven't had experiences like that, because it was a very concentrated thing happening at that place
for sure,
and that maybe it wasn't your fault. You didn't do anything to make that happen. Yeah, I mean, you didn't do anything to make that happen as far as we know, but the combination of ashes and burial ground is just a recipe for the disaster.
Plus a basement.
Yes,
it's just
basement.
It's the perfect recipe for what happened.
Yeah. Unfinished basements, ashes, and a burial ground is the actual perfect storm.
And a house full of people. So,
yeah. Whew.
Yeah, it was very, very interesting experience.
It's heavy.
For a long time, I don't think we talked about it for a couple weeks probably.
Well, you're in denial almost, right?
Yeah, in a sense, and nobody wants, it's like having a hard conversation, because we've all had those conversations with people. Like, you don't want to have it, right? It's like, because you don't want to seem crazy. Like, did I imagine that? Did I dream it? You don't want to seem crazy to the other person. And also, in a way, you don't want to admit that it happened, because it's really freaky.
You don't, because once you confirm, like, that happened, right? We both saw that. We both experienced that. Then it's like, crap, well, now what do we do? Because you're just putting yourself back at square one of the unknown. Acknowledging it, does that really help us, Live in denial and bliss. So nothing since then, right?
No, nothing since then.
Nothing since then. What about your ex? Has she had anything since then?
No, because, well, I mean, not that I'm aware of, I guess, but we got married like 6 months after that. And so any experience that she would have had, we probably would have had together. So.
Yeah, you were together for quite a while.
But no, nothing that I can think of.
What did they do with those ashes?
I don't know. I think she gave them back to her ex-boyfriend.
I mean, we would hope so, right?
I believe that's what happened.
But why would he have left them there?
I'm pretty sure it wasn't a very good split. Yeah, I think he was living in the basement and basically had to get kicked out and would never come get his stuff back.
That makes sense. Bad breakup, but it's like, dude, your dad's ashes.
I think more, it was probably that he just didn't realize they were there, because he just had all of his stuff there. I would imagine that that's just how it was, because most of his stuff just ended up getting put into boxes and put off to the side. Because I don't think he came and got them till months, even after the fact of, we might have even been married by the time he went and came and got his. It was quite a while. I don't know if it was from the ashes or the burial ground.
Again, it was the recipe, the trifecta.
I've always thought that, because we heard what sounded very much like heavy combat boots. So with that, it kind of makes you believe that it's like maybe something that's a little bit older, because boots were very, like, that type of combat boot was very common more in that time era, like late 1800s, stuff like that.
Sure.
Or early 1900s, whatever. So
I can get heavy boots today.
yeah. So who knows? There's so many different things that it could have been. So.
Right. Well, thank you for telling your stories. Any other aspect we need to discuss about it? I feel like we've covered the bases pretty well here.
I don't think so. I
Right.
think that we pretty much covered all of it.
Let me ask you this, because someone brought this up to me, one of my previous guests. She brought up her concern to me of, and this is touching on a point that you made earlier, doing this show, doing this podcast. We talk about spooky stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that talking about these things and having people tell their stories for entertainment's sake is a bad thing?
No, I think a lot of it has to do with the intent behind something, if that makes sense. So I think if we were to do this as an intent to do something bad, I think that definitely brings a different aspect into it.
I could agree to that.
But as of having the intent of just, hey, we want to bring awareness to a situation and talk about some cool stuff. Well, cool, but, you know.
In retrospect.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, looking back.
Talking about that for entertainment purposes and along the lines of that. So I think a lot of it has to do with the intent that is behind the actions.
Yeah.
In the same sense of, you look at all the different, like, true crime podcasts going on. I don't think that the podcasts themselves are, like, inciting violence or anything like that, if that makes sense. So in a similar way of that, I don't feel like the conversation, depending on your beliefs of things, is inviting something bad right now.
Yeah.
I don't feel that way.
I get a little bit of the chills when someone tells me a good, scary story.
For sure.
But yeah, I don't, I never come away from recording and being like, I don't feel good. Like, I feel scared. You know what I mean? I can get wrapped up in the story, but once it's done, it's done. You know?
For sure.
But I just like to get different people's perspectives because everyone believes a little differently.
Yeah.
You can even be religious or non-religious. You can be in the same kind of sphere and still believe a little differently than the person next to you. You know what I mean?
For sure.
And so I just like to get the perspective of how do you look at those things. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You know, I think you're right though. Intent and being actively engaged in a bad thing is different, you know.
Yeah.
Not that I'm trying to justify what I'm doing. I'm going to keep doing this. This is fun. I love it.
Well,
but it's just a good point that someone brought
it was
up to
kind of,
discuss.
so for example, and maybe this was an important thing, but we can talk about it now. When me and my buddies back in the day decided to play Slenderman in the basement, it was with the intent to try and freak us out as much as possible. That's why we put it as in such a spooky environment, make sure none of the lights were on. And so it was with that intent of, we're not just playing a scary game with my buddies. We're trying to freak ourselves out. And
Oh yeah.
so,
And the original Slender Man game was revolutionary as far as scary games went. It was short, it was sweet, it was a cheap game. It might as well have been on the Nintendo 64 with the graphics it had, but
for sure.
it was great.
Yes.
And it scared the daylights
It's still
out of anyone who, to this day, it holds up.
I won't play it.
I
won't do it. Not anymore.
I played the original back in 2012, 2013, whatever. I didn't have, my computer was in an area that was like, there was no way to get it dark. It was above ground, you know. I had light coming in and I did play it even with a little bit of light. I was like, dang, dude, this game is good. And I think that game did such a great job of scaring people for how simple it was, which is, you know,
It's perfect.
fantastic horror games do that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, there's something about creating an environment for scary. Like if we watch a horror movie with all the lights on in the middle of the day, the blinds drawn so the sun's shining, and the effect it has is
It's completely different.
completely different than let's put up the light blocking curtains, let's turn off all the lights, let's light some candles or whatever.
Well,
And watch a horror movie.
Yeah.
We're more tense because we're putting ourselves in
you're putting
Dark.
yourself in that situation.
that. Yeah,
So-
yeah.
In the same way what I was saying with the Slenderman when we played that, it's a little different to say, hey, let's go play a spooky game with all my buddies versus let's try and freak ourselves out as much as we can.
Yeah.
In the same way of, it's like, you know, everybody watches spooky movies around Halloween. And that's just kind of what you do. But it's not the same as let's watch the scare. Let's get a bunch of people together, turn all the lights off, create a spooky environment, and try and watch the scariest movies that we can to see like how spooked we can get.
Yeah.
Like doing
How
that.
high can my heart rate get before
Doing
this kills
that-
me?
And I don't know if it's the intent necessarily that kind of creates that, or if it's something in your own brain. Not exactly sure.
Yeah.
But something is there that's just like a switch for that type of stuff. Sometimes it feels like where you're doing that type of thing and you have an intent for something like that, and because of that, it's allowing something like that to happen. It's just it's like opening the door and saying, "Hey, man, come on in. Like we want you here. So, come on."
Yeah.
So,
I agree. Well, thank you again for coming on and recording with me and telling the people your stories. I love your stories. And I look forward to not hearing more from you, but
hopefully no more.
Yeah, I look forward to, you had some people you've introduced me to have some good stories, and hopefully maybe we could peer pressure them to come on and tell their story.
Maybe someday.
Maybe.
I think that he will. So
Yeah. But yeah, that's all I've got. I think we're pretty set.
for sure.
Cut and clean. Okay. Well, thank you again. Do you have anything you want to plug? Or are you just whatever?
No, I'm a ghost. So
In the best way possible.
yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, everyone, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you or a loved one has a horror story, a true horror story that you think needs to be told on Unholy Vibes, reach out to me on Instagram at Unholy Vibes Pod, or email me at unholyvibespod@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Stay spooky, and we'll see you next time.